Hey, you're listening to Kayla J's Gospel Hour right here on WURD 96.1 FM, 900 AM, streaming live at wordradio.com. You already know we've been having an amazing purpose series, helping folks figure out exactly what their purpose is, how to pray for their purpose, how to stay in their purpose. Listen, it's been amazing. And today, our Purpose Series teacher is coming from the teacher of teachers, the masters of education in my mind, none other than Dr. Cathy O. I am so excited to bring her on to talk about education and purpose. Hey, Dr. O, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kayla. Thanks for having me on the show. It's good to be here.
We're excited to have you. Before we even start diving deep into purpose and how education aligns with that, I have to ask you, got to do a wellness check with you on a scale from 1 to 10. With all that's going on, how do you feel?
Ooh, I think I'm gonna have to say an eight. An eight. I'm still, I'm just concerned about people's health and wellness and self-care. And of course, as an educator, what this means for students and testing, and then all of the racism that's going on and police brutality. So, but God is in control of all of it.
Amen. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. So that's good. That's good to hear that you're at an 8. We've been getting a lot of folks on the higher end, the 8 and the 9s, with the pandemic coming to an end. I'm going to say quote unquote, with things opening back up and vaccines being what they are now. So I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, this is the Purpose Series, so I'm going to start with the biggest question of all. Can you define purpose for us? What is that to you? What is purpose?
So I like to think of purpose as someone's individual life work. I don't think it is some holistic thing that everyone has that is exactly the same. I think it encapsulates a person's life work. What are you doing with your life? That's more, I think, what purpose is all about.
Mm, got you. So why do you believe that it's important to study when you aren't sure of what your purpose is?
Well, because sometimes, your purpose, what it is that you've been put on earth to do, in addition to representing Christ and being one of his disciples, in addition to that, there are different ways that you can live out your purpose. And so sometimes you have to do a little research and study both biblically and spiritually, as well as just professionally and vocationally, so that you can be aligned with what it is that you're supposed to do. So the study part is really important because people will try to tell you what you're supposed to be doing with your life. And so you really need to research that for yourself.
That's good. You really jumped into that next question. How can education, whether it's biblical education or natural education, truly help a person fulfill their purpose in life? A lot of times people say, "Oh, I didn't finish school, but I feel like I'm on purpose." But you may meet someone that has multiple doctoral degrees and say they don't feel like they found their purpose. So how does education align with purpose fulfillment?
Yeah, so a few things. I tell people all the time, don't make it complicated. If purpose is connected to the God in you, then your life is going to be drawn to what it is that you're supposed to be doing. Like I said before, if you're not careful, people will push or pull you in a certain direction. So the education piece is important because if you feel inwardly you really want to help sick people, well, then you have to research all the roles related to helping people that are sick. Do you want to be a nurse? Do you want to be a doctor? Do you want to be a therapist? Someone else working in mental health services? Do you want to be an occupational therapist? There are a lot of different ways to minister and serve people who are sick. So you study according to what you have interest in and what comes natural for you. And then you study that in the scriptures as well. Jesus healed sick people, if that's a focus that you want to have. People had to eat in the scriptures. People had to travel in the scriptures. You know what I mean?
Right.
Nobody was building a Tesla at that time, but people were looking at ways that they could move to different places faster and quicker. So everything you need to learn about life is in the scriptures as well. But you got to study according to what I call the drawing and the knowing that you have in your heart.
Mm. Explain a little bit of what that may be, the knowing and the drawing in your heart, before we
Sure.
move on.
Sure, yeah. So let's take the disciples, Peter in particular, and though they were a majority of them were fishermen. They had to fish in order to feed their families, but not just actually cooking the fish. They had fishing businesses where they were able to feed other families, and they were able to generate what represents income at that time in order to live well. And then when Jesus came along and said, I want to make you fishers of men, it was this natural inclination toward, well, I know how to catch stuff. I know how to find where the fish are. I know how to be patient so that I can get something on my hook and reel it in. So you have a knowing, a pull inside of you. I'm sure somewhere in your life as a child growing up, Kayla, you like to talk to people. You were a communicator. You paid attention to people who are good communicators. Perhaps you like to write. Perhaps you like to interview people. You liked music and production. That's a natural kind of drawing and knowing to what you're interested in right now. So that's what I mean by that. And I think that the Lord really puts that in you. Look at
Mm.
different women in the Bible and what it is that they did. Look at Dorcas. Look at the Proverbs 31 woman. Look at the widow who was able to turn oil into a business. So you know what I mean?
Right.
Knowing there's a natural thing inside you. In the Bible, God told Mary, "Go and talk to Elizabeth," because Elizabeth had been where she was going. That makes Elizabeth a mentor. That makes her someone who reaches out to other women. That makes her, in some ways, like a midwife. So there's a seed inside of each one of us that's growing. And I think when we nurture it, it kind of pushes us in the right direction. So that's what I mean by there's a drawing and a knowing on the inside. Let me say this. I'm fortunate because my entire life, I only wanted to be and do one thing, and
Mm.
that was teaching. I mean, from 3 and 4 years old, I could have been doing my toys' hair. You know what I mean? I could have been trying to draw clothes on paper for my toys. No, I was teaching my toys. I had a yardstick. I was whacking them across the head and yelling, "Now say your ABCs and stand up straight, get in a straight line." But the teacher, you know what I mean?
Right.
It was in me from the very beginning. So there's no point now in me trying to figure out, is it God's will for me to be a nurse or a lawyer? Because I've been teaching since I was 3 years old.
Wow, that took me back to what I used to do. They have pictures of me making choirs all around the house. I used to make a choir, make a church out of lotion bottles, perfume bottles, and we would have rehearsals.
Right, right. And so look at your work now in the studio, online, all of your production, your communications background, all of that. You were doing that when you were lining up bottles in the house.
Yes,
Yep,
yes.
yep.
Oh man, one thing that I really love about you, Dr. O, is every time I've sat under your teaching, you've always given us some good books to go read and research. So with this purpose series, I have to ask you, are there any books you would suggest for people who are trying to find exactly what their purpose is? Now, these could be books in the Bible or books that someone wrote, but what are your suggestions?
Oh, wow, books to read. So Miles Monroe has a book about understanding the power and the purpose of a woman. So I absolutely recommend that to women. Bishop Jakes, T.D. Jakes, has written great books for women and men, but particularly has a whole series for men that I think was birthed out of his Manpower series. I think that's important. Believe it or not, when you look at the prophets in the Bible, the book sometimes we don't read a lot, Ezra and Zechariah, Isaiah, Jeremiah. If you look closely at those, the Lord always told them in the beginning what it is they were supposed to be doing. He told Jeremiah,
Hmm.
I knew you when you were in the womb, and I have called you to be a prophet to the nations. In other words, he was letting Jeremiah know in his adulthood that before birth you were a speaker. Before
Mm.
birth you had an international platform. Before birth, I had a plan for people to be lined up to wait to hear what you have to say. Not being a fisherman, not being a carpenter. He said a prophet to the nations, a speaker with a very large audience. So we have to learn how to read the word and study the scriptures, of course, to know our purpose. But like I said, there's so many books out there about it. Even, believe it or not, Living Your Best Life Now and books like that really help you kind of narrow down what it is that you're supposed to be doing. And not just spiritual books. There are lots of books out there that help people figure out what they're supposed to be doing with their life.
Oh, that's great. I'm gonna have to definitely check out the Miles Monroe one. Uh, but lining back up with the spiritual book, the Bible, right? We had Elder Cecil Thompson come on a few weeks ago and talk about the power of prayer and how
Mm,
that aligns with your purpose to help you find your purpose and to help you fulfill it and how to stay on track with your purpose. You
yes.
know, so on the education side, biblical study. How important is that once we know what our purpose is? How does that align with the fulfillment process?
Oh, that's so good. That's a good question, Kayla. Here's how the scriptures connect with it. It's like an airplane. You know how they say that an airplane is always just a little bit off the path. It's very, very
Right.
close, but just a little bit off its path. So that's the same way it is with life, because there's so much corruption in the world, distraction in the world, pressure from people, family, friends, and enemies. So what the Bible does, the Bible is a guiding light. My words are a light unto your path, the Bible says. So spiritual study helps us to stay connected to God and to help us stay on the path that we're supposed to be on and not miss it. When we limit
Mhm.
ourselves to just, professional text and what's written in the world of literature and people's opinions, and I'm sure the audience is not ready for this, but I'm going to say it, everything that comes across the pulpit, you have to know how to rightly divide it. And I'm not saying don't listen to the pastor or preacher. I'm saying that the pastor may be making a reference or an example, and we might be sitting in the audience saying, yes, that's my confirmation. I'm supposed to be a banker. You're not supposed to be a banker. You're supposed to stay in nursing school. I'm leaving nursing school to be an investor because the pastor said no. So, this is why we have to really study the scriptures for ourselves, because God uses it as a guiding light to help us stay on the right track.
That's good. You're really leading into this next question.
Okay.
A few weeks ago, right before we talked about prayer, I had on Elder Michael Payton to talk about his purpose with aligning with teaching. To speak to the teachers.
Yes.
Now, because I believe you are a masterful teacher, we just talked about the biblical study of it. Talk to those that know that they're called to teach and they think that their only outlet to teach is Sunday school. How
Oh,
do they fulfill that purpose outside of just the biblical teachings of the church?
sure. So let me say this. Sunday school, as much as I love it, I teach Sunday school every Sunday for my church as well. As much as I love it, Sunday school is not a scriptural assignment. It is a man made entity or function that helps us increase our understanding of the word. But so is Wednesday night and Thursday night Bible study. So is listening to CDs and audios of people preaching. That helps with Bible study. Reading books that help with Bible study. So if someone has the teaching gift, then that means you are assigned to impart knowledge to the hearer, whoever the hearer is. The
Mm,
hearer might be the choir, and you may have to teach them about Levitical order and understanding God's purpose for music and why that requires a worship lifestyle. The hearer may be a class in a college learning how to be attorneys, but the teaching gift is what makes you effective with the audience that you've been assigned. So, in a church, since you mentioned Sunday school, the youth need to be taught. Young mothers, old mothers sometimes, need to be taught. Young boys need to be taught. Deacons and elders need to be taught how to do that job and how to do it well. So the teaching gift is not limited to just Sunday school. If you're in a church that has a security team, they have to be taught about security. And so the difference between the teaching gift and just plain old leadership is sometimes people just tell you what to do because they're the leader. But teachers impart knowledge in a way that you can understand, and then they follow up to make sure you can rightly divide it. And we need that. So we need that certainly in Sunday school and Christian education, but it far exceeds that. Look at what you're doing right now, and I know that you're in the youth ministry, but you don't have to be teaching Sunday school. You could be teaching them about mass communication, journalism, production, stereo, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, you mentioned Christian education and want to talk about that too, because now we have, Christian schools, Christian day schools, we have seminary schools, we have all of these institutions where education is taking place, and
Yes,
we put the church name on top of it.
yes.
What about those people who may be deans at a Christian education school? How do they know if they're truly fulfilling that purpose in them? How do they educate themselves on fulfilling that?
So two things. The first part of your question was, how do they know if they're being effective in it and if they're in the right place? If you still love it when it hurts, you know that you are called. When
Wow.
you got to love it when it hurts. I taught in the inner city. I had students carrying drugs and guns. I had students shot. I had students committing suicide. And but I loved it even when it hurt. I had no question of whether I was going back that next day or that following Monday or the following school year. So that it requires calling to do that. Now, during this pandemic that we've been in, all the work that classroom teachers have been doing, those who have been doing it well are probably called. They probably have the teaching gift, and they still do it when it hurts. They still do it when it's uncomfortable. They still do it when they don't like the principal or they feel the principal doesn't make the right decisions. They still do it with difficult parents. And so is the case with the church. Those who keep coming back and being faithful and effective and doing the work as unto God, you know they have a calling and an anointing connected to their purpose to do it well. The education part is something else because you can go and get a professional license or certificate, but that does not mean you have the teaching gift.
Mm.
You can get a professional license and credential to be a doctor, but that doesn't mean you have the ministry of helps and healing, which you really need to be effective. So I think that that's another reason why it's important to pursue knowledge. But I don't think that churches need to just slap their name on some um, already or pre-existing institution. They need to know that this is something that we've been assigned to, and the people in our ministry are called to do this well, like a church that has a daycare or a school or after school program or mentoring program for youth. They have to have people working in those programs who know that teaching and working with those youth is their gift. And everybody, who is a dean or a director of education or a school principal, they're not doing it out of purpose and passion. They're doing it for a job and for income. So
Uh, that's interesting that you said that, because a lot of folks are doing it for income. Is there a such calling to be a principal, to be a dean? Do you think that's a thing?
absolutely. Let's look at the spiritual gifts. Prophecy, teaching, administration is one of the spiritual gifts. So, in order to be a good leader of a school, then you need to have the teaching gift. You may not think you need to, but you need to have the teaching gift. You need to have the gift of administration because that's what a school leader or school administrator is. You might have to have the gift of helps because you may have to come out of your office and do some things yourself. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And you know what, Kayla? So everybody has spiritual gifts because we are spiritual beings, whether we walk according to the scriptures or not. So there are a lot of people who have spiritual gifts. There's no way you're going to tell me that Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry, regardless of their spiritual beliefs, President Joe Biden, President Obama, there's no way Kamala Harris, you're going to tell me these people have no spiritual gifts to be effective at what they're doing? Absolutely, they have spiritual gifts. Stephen King had a spiritual gift. He may not have ever used it to advance the work of the kingdom, but the writing and the success that he's had in literature, that's a gift. Everybody can't do that.
Yeah, you're right. Everybody certainly can't do that. Uh, Speak right now to that person that feels they are called to education. They know that they have an education calling or a teaching calling, and they're working right now, and they're a little tired. We've been in the pandemic. They've had to figure out new ways to teach, new ways to help. Uh, speak to them right now and give them a little bit of encouragement.
Yeah, so if you're an educator out here, particularly a teacher, a college professor, a special education coordinator, a school principal, or what I call non instructional staff working in a school agency, know that, first of all, that you are loved and that God called us to teach all nations. So if you're doing the job from your heart and not just from your head, there's most certainly a blessing and a reward in it. I admonish you not to try to do it without God because you will burn out and run out of steam. But it's the presence of the Lord and His hand and calling on your life that keeps you going. I do think that you, as an educator out there, have not been celebrated enough. You've not been appreciated enough, rewarded enough for the huge impact you're making on people's lives. There is no one in the universe who is accomplished without having been taught. So the teaching role is so necessary. But the Bible says God is not unjust to forget your labor of love and how you have ministered to others and how you continue to minister. Teaching is a vocation, it's not a job, it's a ministry. You don't get to clock in and clock out. If you're an educator all the time, everywhere.
Wow, that's good. I hope she helped you guys. I'm not an educator, but I know I took some nuggets from that myself. Dr. O, I know you have an amazing ministry. You have amazing programs. Please let the people know how they can connect with you and all that you do.
Sure, absolutely. So follow me on all social media at Dr. Cathy O, DrCathy, and the letter O. I run an educational effectiveness group, and my team works primarily with schools, school districts, and colleges of education, helping to improve teaching and learning, both for those for teachers, those who want to be teachers, and for students as well.
Like, that's great. That's great. Make sure y'all follow her. Make sure y'all connect with her. She's an amazing person. Dr. O, thank you so much for joining me tonight on Kayla J's Gospel Hour. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, so good to be here. I'm glad you asked me back, and it's just really good to have an opportunity to reconnect with you.
Always, always. All right, folks, that's our purpose series today with Dr. Cathy O talking education for those of you that are called to education out there. Continue to listen. This is Kayla J's Gospel Hour. It's time to get right back to the music.